Now, one thing I should mention about dynamic maps is with the maps that we use frequently, oftentimes whoever made the map is not going to want us to go ahead and just mess around with the layout of the map to suit a particular use case. So what we can do is we can actually create within the map, we can create a sub copy of the map that belongs to us, even if the map as a whole doesn't, and then we can manipulate that. So that's called a personal map. It's a relatively new feature, and I did want to make you aware of that. All right, so we already talked about incidents. So the incident pane pops out on the right-hand side of the screen, and we will see this in action shortly. Already talked about most of this. So then in the results pane of a runbook step, which we'll see later, at the top of the results pane, there's this tiny little button. Why it's so little, I don't know. But this allows us to publish, create a link for that particular set of data that's been gathered right in the incident. And then anybody can go back with that link and see the results that we got. So that's SMI. Now the P is for portal. A portal is a way to share an incident and its message feed and the maps associated with it. It's a way to share to people who don't need to be in the main NetBrain workstation for whatever reason. So not to get into the money aspect of NetBrain, but I should mention to explain why this is valuable, NetBrain is licensed on two factors. First of all is what are called node licenses, which is simply how many devices can you discover with your NetBrain, and that depends on how much money you give us every year. The other thing is called a seat license, which is how many users can be in the NetBrain workstation proper at the same time. There's no limit to the number of accounts you can have in your NetBrain, but only X number of people can be working on it at any given time. And what the value of X is, again, depends on how much money you choose to give us every year. So if we have somebody who wants to keep an eye on what we're doing but doesn't need to be in the NetBrain workstation, or maybe we don't want them in the NetBrain workstation because maybe it's an internal or external customer who we want to, rather than having them call us every hour for a progress update, we can just say, here, go look at this, and you can actually watch us troubleshoot and even let us know if it suddenly starts working again or something. You can let them into an incident portal, which allows them to see the maps, to see the IM feed, and then even to contribute to the conversation. So it's not going to show them any super detailed or secure data or anything like that, but it is a pretty cool thing. So that's portal, which sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't, but that's the P in SMIP. Okay. So any questions about anything we've discussed up to this point before we switch over to the hands-on example?
Yes. What is the difference between, what did you say, network intent and the run book?
The short answer for now is that a network intent is one of three different types of adaptive automation objects that we can create, and the automation is run typically within a runbook. So if a runbook is a procedure, a specific network intent would be a particular bullet point in that procedure. Does that make sense?
Is it, we do it the runbook, but we don't do it network intent? Is it the automation does it?
Yeah, it'll make more sense, I think, after the second half of class. So okay. I'm going to ask you to just kind of hold on to that question, and then if at the end of class it's still not making any sense, which is entirely possible, given that I'm not a Superman or anything in terms of explaining stuff, if that's the case, then just hit me again and I'll try to go into it in a better way. Okay?
Thanks.
No problem. All right, so anybody else? That's a very good question, but again, it's like, we'll get to that, so hopefully. All right, so intent defined, so you mean in terms of general industry usage, William, or in terms of NetBrain usage? because the latter is derived from the former. In general sense, yeah, so in the general sense, it means what is the intention of whoever designed this particular aspect of the network configuration? How was the device supposed to be? A network intent in NetBrain is an automation object that is designed to verify a specific piece of the designer's intent on demand. It's basically going to, we'll get into what it is. But yeah, so that's why we named it that, essentially. So we have our own way of talking and phrasing things at NetBrain. You kind of get used to it. Yeah, but you get used to it. So I can feel safe saying about that, at least on recording. All right. Anyway, so I've logged in, and now I'm looking at my NetBrain desktop. So in a few broad strokes of the GUI, NetBrain has some similarities to Microsoft Windows. First of all, there's the desktop, which can contain shortcuts to various features and functions that we pin here. And we can also save files directly to our desktop, just like in Windows. See, I've got a whole bunch of maps here. We also have a taskbar, in this case along the left-hand side of the screen, although unlike my Windows taskbar, which I should shut off Teams in case I start getting messages or something. But unlike my Windows taskbar, I cannot customize this. What all you're going to see here depends on what you have access to do and your specific version of NetBrain. So in general, whether it comes to the taskbar or the start menu up here, if you don't have permission to do something, you're just not going to see it listed. So to take a concrete example here in the class lab, my start menu is a heck of a lot longer than your guys will be, because you have just fewer permissions of necessity. I should also mention the plus side here allows you to create new different things on demand. So don't forget that that exists. We'll talk about the file system and so forth in a bit. If I wanted to open a site map, I would open up my site pane here. And so we can have our broader scale category sites, and then the actual sites where the devices are linked are these darker colored icons. And then if there's a particular site we want to see its map, we just right click and open the site map, which will contain all of the member devices. And it's very common to use these site maps over and over and over again for different things. But we are going to create a brand new map in relation to our very loose use case here. And that use case is a particular, so, will others see my NetBrain desktop or just for an individual? Your desktop is private to you. So anything saved to your desktop is a private file to your user account, although you can, of course, still share it, as we'll see. Likewise, may as well look at this now. If we go into the file system, and it actually loads sometime today. The class lab has these load spikes for me. Specifically, I don't know why. And it does appear to be just the class lab specifically. But there's desktop, private, and public, as we'll see. So desktop and private are both private to our user account. Public is visible to all authorized users to this NetBrain domain. So for example, if we go into public NetBrain 101, we see that not only is there a dynamic map to be used with the workbook that I'm going to post probably later today, or tomorrow, but also there's a PDF copy of the slide deck that we can download. So you can actually upload anything you want into the NetBrain file system within size limits, of course. So there's that. Now, in order to create a dynamic map on demand, the most common way to do this is with what's called a search and extend map creation. So the search part is the visual search field right here. Remember, string-based search engine for the entire database. So I'm going to search for the IP address of an end system whose user is reporting some trouble connecting to the data center. They're reporting a lot of slowness, to be specific. So I have here all my different types of results. There could be lots of different types of results. And within those results, there can be lots of different hyperlinks. Each of these hyperlinks will open different data sets, typically as a pop-up. I'm not going to go through what all they can be. We'd be here all day. But just know that there's a lot of information right at your fingertips here that you can just click and have available. What I am going to do is I'm going to click to select the result or results that I want, and then I'm going to click map on any one of them. And what this does is it adds my selection to the currently active dynamic map. And so I'll answer your question in a second, William. So I didn't have a dynamic map open, and so it created a new blank map and added my selection or selections to that map. All right, and William wants to know, does this end system has to be registered as a NetBrain node? The word is discovered, but yes, any device that NetBrain is going to see has to be discovered. So end systems are typically discovered not so much in and of themselves, but by inference from their local switch and so forth. But they, in some ways, we can communicate with them directly. One of my colleagues has actually rigged adaptive automation to work with PowerShell on a Windows system, which is pretty cool. But I'm not going to get into that right now. So yes, end systems don't cost money. So things like end systems, IP phones, things like that, they don't actually count against your node license limit. So discovering this device into NetBrain did not count in money terms, so which is nice. If you want to know more about discovery and what all that involves, I can answer some basic questions after class. If you want the full chapter and verse, come join me tomorrow or every other Wednesday for NetBrain 401. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to click the plus sign on this device, and what it does is it shows me all of the neighbors that NetBrain knows about for this particular device. And we see logical neighbors, physical neighbors. In this case, it's the same access switch, but it could potentially be different devices. And you may have multiple logical topologies depending on what's going on. NetBrain might split stuff up to help you keep track of what's going on. And you select the link that you want. In this case, by selecting a link from the L3 list, I'm going to say that I want to see the logical connectivity between these two devices, but I could just as easily see the physical connectivity. You can even put them both on the same map page at the same time, but that's very much not a best practice. The reason being that once you start mixing L2 and L3 on the same map page, it just visually turns into a complete kludge in my experience. And so I highly recommend keeping L2 and L3 on separate map pages. So what I have now is 3 items. I've got the end system, I've got the access switch, and I've got this thing. This thing is a LAN segment. It's representing the fact that both of these interfaces are facing onto the 10.20.1.1.0 C-class network segment. If I had other devices that were facing into this same segment, even if they weren't directly connecting to each other, I would see all of them be connected to this particular LAN. Because again, we're looking at logical connectivity. And you might also see WANs and VPNs and whatever else. So now I'm going to select my access switch. Again, I'm going to select everything and extend it. I'm going to extend to the core. And let's grab the other core and the 2 routers. There we go. All right. So we've extended that out. Now, in addition to being able to add stuff to the map, we can also remove stuff as needed. So let's say I don't particularly care about the 4th floor here. I can just click to select, or I can left click and hold to drag, and then press the delete key on my keyboard. And what that just did, NetBrain did not just forget about that switch. I just said I don't want to see it on this particular dynamic map. Remember, what part of the network am I interested in right now? And so as far as laying this out, I can click and drag to rearrange stuff. There's also some tools to help me with the layout. So the 2 that I want to focus on, I find by right-clicking any blank space on the map. And yes, you can right-click devices and so forth and get a contextual menu. But the 2 tools I want to mention, first of all, auto link. This allows me for any given topology layer to select all links of that layer, add them all, or remove them all. So if I say add link for L3, we see that all the redundant logical connections among these devices are shown. And